The cleaning lady wins the lottery and tries to deceive her husband when signing the divorce papers. Sitting in front of the television, watching a celebrity gossip show, looking utterly bored. Suddenly, the program is interrupted for an announcement that someone from her town had won the grand lottery prize. Still unexcited, Sarah thought that this was a kind of luck she would never have, having her 6 numbers drawn. Then, the host announced that the winning numbers were 04, 08, 15, 16, 23, and 42. Hearing these numbers, Sarah nearly fell off the couch. That couldn't be possible. She was Tampa, Florida's newest millionaire. The 37-year-old cleaning lady had always enjoyed playing the lottery since she started working. She made bets regularly, but despite this, she never imagined that luck would actually favor her. Still doubting her fortune, Sarah searched her bedside table for the ticket, and then she was certain that luck had truly smiled upon her. When the initial shock of the revelation passed, she realized she would have to tell the news to her husband, Michael. The 45-year-old electrician had been her husband for over 10 years. The two had no children. Sarah never wanted to be a mother, and Michael already had a daughter from a previous relationship. Thus, they agreed on this point and always had a stable relationship. Michael was a man who loved his job, and whenever he could, he bought gifts for Sarah. However, their financial situation was far from good, and therefore, they needed to save in every possible way. Although she understood they didn't have extra money, Sarah was ambitious and longed for a wealthy life. Now that she had the winning ticket in hand, she began to think about how she wanted to spend that money and how her husband would probably advise her to use that fortune wisely. Sarah had no desire to be frugal and spend cautiously, especially now that she had more money than the GDP of some small countries. Reflecting on this situation, Sarah concluded that the best course of action was not to tell Michael about the prize. Despite having a good relationship, there wasn't exactly a great love between them. So, the cleaning lady decided she would divorce her husband without telling him about the fortune. But to get rid of Michael without having to share the wealth, Sarah would need to convince him to sign an agreement where they wouldn't divide anything after the separation. It was all she needed, to leave half of that fortune to a husband who had been incapable of succeeding in life on his own. That night, when Michael arrived at the small wooden house he shared with his wife, he found his suitcases in the living room. Not understanding anything, he asked, "Are we going on a trip?" Sarah then replied, "I'm tired of you and want a divorce." In shock, Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing, as everything seemed normal when he left for work in the morning. Sarah had been cold, but nothing unusual. Her usual state was one of indifference. Deeply saddened by the news, Michael tried to reason with Sarah and reverse the situation. He told her that he loved her very much and wanted to share his life with her forever. However, everything he said only served to irritate Sarah even more, who expelled him with even more determination. 20 minutes after returning from work, Michael was being thrown out of the house with his suitcases. Karen, the nosy neighbor, stepped out of her house to watch the scene and immediately started imagining what reason Sarah could have for throwing Michael out on the street. The neighbor concluded that the man must have cheated on his wife. There was no other explanation for such behavior. Other neighbors appeared at their doors and windows to witness the drama unfolding in the neighborhood. Emily, one of the neighbors, however, felt sorry to see Michael being kicked out. She knew he was a good man, so she decided to help the neighbor out of this embarrassing situation. She went over to Michael and told him that she was sorry for everything, including his suitcases that Sarah had thrown outside, exposing his underwear for everyone to see. The man, still with his head down, thought that this young woman was going to mock him for the situation he found himself in. However, Emily offered him a hand to help him up and said that if he allowed it, she would help him gather all those clothes and close the suitcases again. Wanting nothing more than for that situation to end quickly, Michael accepted Emily's help. Within minutes, the two had gathered his clothes that were scattered on the street. Karen already had the whole gossip storyline ready in her mind as she watched the scene. If Emily had left her house to help Michael right after he was kicked out, it must be because she was the mistress. Sarah must have discovered everything through messages on his phone, and now they were publicly admitting the affair. The gossipmonger didn't even want to see the scene until the end. She rushed to grab her phone to start sending the story in audio form to her neighborhood friends. The gossip network would soon spread this tale of betrayal and revenge to everyone's ears. Meanwhile, inside her house, Sarah could only think about the fur coats and designer bags she would buy with all that money. As a cleaning lady, she worked in the homes of middle-class and some very wealthy women. While cleaning these houses, she saw the beautiful clothes, shoes, and bags these women had. The more she thought about these luxury items, the more Sarah thought it was the best decision in the world to get rid of Michael. The husband would never let her buy whatever she wanted in peace. He would definitely want her to buy a house and invest, boring things that a millionaire doesn't need to do. Still dazed, Michael entered Emily's simple home. Although he knew the neighbor by sight, he had never paid much attention to her or entered her home. The 35-year-old woman was indeed very beautiful. If he were in love with Sarah, he might even have looked at her differently. However, Michael was absolutely faithful and hoped that his wife would calm down and call him for a conversation. Emily served a strong black coffee to Michael to help him recover from the shock of the sudden separation and the humiliation he had endured. She then told him that she wasn't a gossip like the other neighbors and didn't want to know the details, but she needed to know if Sarah had thrown him out for a serious reason. The man understood that Emily was just being cautious. After all, she was practically taking in a stranger. Since she lived alone, it was important to know if he had any vices or was violent. Michael replied that he was incapable of harming a fly and that he really couldn't understand what had happened to his wife to make her act that way. He mentioned that he had gone to work as usual in the morning and that everything was fine between him and Sarah. But as soon as he got home, he found the suitcases in the living room and the request for a divorce. It was incomprehensible to him what could have happened in those hours for Sarah not to want him anymore. As he talked about what happened, he burst into tears. Emily felt sorry for the man because she understood how he felt. About 6 months ago, she had also been blindsided by her then-fiancé, David. The guy simply sent her a text message. The wedding date was set for 6 months later, meaning that at the moment Emily was consoling Michael in her kitchen, she should have been marrying David. For a while, she couldn't understand what had happened, but being proud, she didn't reach out to him. One day, Jessica, one of her friends, announced on social media that she was engaged and would be getting married in 2 months. When Emily checked out the photos of Jessica with this mysterious fiancé who had appeared out of nowhere, she realized it was none other than David. After that, she learned from mutual acquaintances that the romance between the two had begun long before they broke up. With this memory so fresh in her mind, and knowing that David was on his honeymoon with Jessica at that very moment, Emily imagined that Sarah must have fallen in love with someone else. But knowing how painful that possibility could be, she decided not to mention it to Michael. In his thoughts, Michael replayed the events of the past week and even talked about them with Emily. Maybe a woman could understand if he had done something wrong to his wife, something that might have motivated her to act this way. Among the moments he replayed for Emily was the day he and his wife went to the neighborhood lottery store to place a bet. Michael told Emily how much his wife enjoyed lottery bets and that he didn't mind paying for the tickets for her. The two had fun choosing the numbers. Each chose 3 numbers, giving luck a chance. He laughed as he said he knew they would never win the prize, but he loved seeing Sarah like a child who had won an ice cream. While the man talked about the trip to the lottery store, Emily remembered that she had the TV on when the programming was interrupted to announce that there was a winner in the city. She came up with an idea in her mind, but thought she was being too imaginative. This kind of thing doesn't happen in real life. Michael realized he had nowhere to go. Emily then told him that the invitation wasn't just for coffee. He could stay at her place and sleep on the couch until he found somewhere else. Besides being a good person, Emily also knew how hard it was to recover from such a traumatic breakup. The next day, even though he hadn't slept much, Michael went to work. He couldn't risk losing his job in addition to his wife. Emily saw him to the door and told him to come back at the end of the day. He had a place to stay at her house. The man then left Emily's house and was met with the curious eyes of Karen. What he didn't know was that at that moment, the nosy neighbor had already spread to the entire neighborhood that he and Emily were having an affair. According to Karen's version, the two had been together long before Emily moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago. Sarah had found out, And the last straw was him bringing the mistress to live a few meters away. Karen and other nosy neighbors went to Sarah's house early in the day to offer her comfort. In reality, they wanted to know more about what had happened, trying to uncover more details about the story they had collectively invented but had already adopted as truth. The gossips started dropping hints to Sarah. Smart, Sarah quickly understood where they were heading and confirmed the whole story. She said that Emily had indeed been her husband's mistress for years, and that finding out he had settled her so close to their home had been a big shock. This story came in handy. Sarah could request the testimony of these gossips, and thus put the judge who would analyze the case in her favor. Every precaution was necessary to ensure that all the money would stay with her. On the same day, Sarah contacted a lawyer recommended by one of her employers. To the lawyer, Sarah told this false story of betrayal and said she wanted to separate without having to split any assets with her husband because of an old car she had bought. Pretending to be pitiful, Sarah said that although the car was from 1987, it was her pride and joy. Surely, Michael would make her sell it to keep the money. The employer, who found the story tiresome, passed on the contact of a lawyer she knew who didn't charge much. Although his fees weren't high, Richard was known as a lawyer who had won many contested divorce cases. 2 days later, Michael was notified that the divorce papers were ready to be signed. The documents were sent for Michael to read in advance. Richard tried to circumvent the law and prevent prior reading, but he couldn't avoid it. Together with Emily, who had studied law for 2 years, Michael read the document. The young woman, who still dreamed of becoming a lawyer someday, explained to him that the main clause of the document established the non-division of assets. Michael found it strange since the house he lived in with Sarah was their own and was in his name. According to that document, upon their separation, the woman would have no right to the house. He had never thought of doing something like this out of revenge, and now his own wife was making this proposal. A red flag went off in Emily's mind. There was indeed something very strange about this sudden divorce request. Now that she knew Michael a little better, Emily was sure the man wouldn't have done anything wrong to his wife. But then, what could explain such an impulsive decision? The divorce hearing was scheduled for the following afternoon. Emily had little time to figure out what was going on. Despite noticing that the neighbors were looking at her with hostility, Emily decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. This was an excuse to keep an eye on Sarah's movements. About half an hour after the improvised stakeout, Emily hit pay dirt. She saw the woman arriving home loaded with bags from neighborhood clothing stores. She remembered Michael mentioning that they were going through a very tough financial situation. Emily knew the owner of that store, Margaret, a woman of almost 50 who was always very friendly with her. When she got to the store, Emily found Margaret tidying up a clothing rack, very busy. The woman smiled at Emily and told her to excuse her, but the previous customer had left the store in a mess. So, Emily asked if the previous customer was Sarah. Margaret gave her a strange look and then said, "Emily, you seem like a nice girl, and I can't believe the nasty things they're saying about you and Sarah's husband. Now you're asking me about her, and I'm starting to find it odd. Is something going on between you and Michael?" Emily seemed very surprised, but she soon understood the neighbors' hostile looks. Surely, some gossip about her and Michael was circulating because she had taken him in during a time of need. With great patience, Emily explained to Margaret that she had only taken in someone who had nowhere to go and said she found Sarah's behavior very suspicious. Margaret then told Emily that Sarah had shown up with a lot of money and had bought several clothes in her store. That woman was unbearable, but since she had the money to pay for the clothes in full, she was very well served. However, Margaret said she found it very strange since Emily returned home and searched Michael's document folder for the lottery tickets he had bought for his wife. She soon found the original ticket and a receipt showing payment with Michael's debit card. Within minutes, Emily looked up the winning lottery numbers and discovered they were 04, 08, 15, 16, 23, and 42, the same numbers marked on the original ticket. It didn't take long for Emily to connect the sudden divorce request without asset division to the lottery prize. After another quick search, she discovered that the $1 million prize had not yet been claimed. Sarah was surely waiting for the divorce to be finalized and had managed to get an advance from someone. This would explain the spending at Margaret's store. To prevent Michael from being deceived, Emily had little time to act. When the man came home from work, he found Emily researching on the internet. She was very serious. As soon as she saw him, she told him to sit down because she knew why Sarah had left him. As soon as he heard the whole story from Emily, Michael couldn't believe that the wife he loved so much had been capable of such a sordid scheme against him. But it couldn't stay that way. Michael needed to do something. Emily then explained that she had spent the day researching and concluded that the prize was his since he had paid for the ticket. They had two ways to get back what was rightfully his. Michael was curious and asked Emily to explain. She told him they could go through all the legal channels, but that would be exhausting and could take time. By then, Sarah could have squandered a good portion of the fortune. The other possibility involved something somewhat illegal, but nothing serious. Michael listened to the plan and concluded that Sarah deserved a lesson. Then, the following afternoon, Michael went to Sarah's lawyer's office. The woman was already waiting for him, impatient. Before signing the divorce, Michael asked some questions. He kept looking at his cell phone repeatedly. After 20 minutes of questions, Sarah lost her patience and told her husband to sign already. He then looked at the phone screen one more time, then with a smile, signed the documents. She thought Michael would lose that stupid grin when he found out she would be keeping a large fortune all to herself. When all the papers were signed, Sarah and Michael left the lawyer's office and went their separate ways. When he got to Emily's house, Michael asked her if everything had gone well. She then showed him the lottery ticket. The paper generated by the lottery confirmed the bet was in their possession, as was the receipt showing he had paid for the ticket. The day before, Emily had suggested to Michael that while he was at the divorce hearing with Sarah, she would look for the ticket at their house. It wasn't difficult for Emily to force the back window. Michael had already told Emily that window had problems. The woman entered the house and searched until she found the ticket. As soon as she had the ticket in hand and was out of Sarah's house, Emily sent a message for Michael to sign the documents. So, when he signed the documents, he knew he was signing confirmation that all that money would remain his. Sarah would be devastated when she found out her scheme had backfired on her. After all, she was the one who requested the divorce and included the non-division of assets clause. Sarah arrived home very happy. On the way, she had stopped at the hairdresser's for a new haircut. She had told the lawyer about the lottery prize, and the man had lent her a significant amount of money to be repaid after the prize was collected. To prevent Michael from discovering the prize before signing the papers, Sarah decided to cash in the money the next day. With the divorce signed, Sarah popped champagne and drank it alone in her house. The property was in Michael's name, and she had to leave within a week, as agreed at the hearing. She was happy to leave that poor shack behind. From now on, she would travel and stay in luxury hotels. Michael could make good use of that horrendous house. Sarah wasn't all bad. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a headache. Who knew rich people's drinks could give you a hangover? She quickly opened the bedside drawer and nearly fainted at what she saw inside. Basically, the woman saw her usual personal belongings, except for one, the most important one in her life, the winning ticket. In the excitement of having tricked her ex-husband into signing the divorce on her terms, Sarah didn't even check the drawer when she got home the previous afternoon. But now she faced the staggering reality that the ticket was no longer there. What would she do? Could the ticket be somewhere else? The woman searched frantically for the ticket until she heard a commotion outside her house. Curious, she ran to the window and then almost fainted for the second time that morning. There were several journalists in front of Emily's house, and her ex-husband was holding a giant check with the lottery prize amount written in full. It was an awards ceremony. Michael didn't oppose having everything recorded. In fact, the whole scene was part of the lesson he planned to teach Sarah. The woman couldn't understand how the prize was being awarded to Michael, so still in her pajamas, disheveled, and looking hungover, Sarah went in front of the cameras. She started screaming that the prize was hers, that the winning ticket belonged to her. The reporters became interested in this story unfolding before their lenses. Then, the lottery representative clarified that the winner was Michael, who not only had the winning ticket, but also had the receipt for the bet. The receipt was in his name. There was no doubt. Michael calmly told the journalists that the woman was his ex-wife, who couldn't accept the divorce. He had suggested they divide the assets, meaning he would share the fortune with her, but she said she preferred the divorce without any division. But being very generous, he was willing to give up the house that was in his name so she could continue living there. If it were up to him, Sarah would never be homeless, and he would even transfer that house to her name. Upon hearing these statements, the people around applauded Michael. Sarah couldn't believe what was happening. Overnight, she had lost a vast fortune, and all she had left was an old house, given as a gift by her useless ex-husband. Enraged, she wondered how Michael, being so stupid, had managed to deceive her, discover her scheme, and still steal her ticket. Then she looked and saw Emily smiling in the background and understood that the neighbor was behind the whole plan. Furious, Sarah lunged at Emily, knocking her to the ground. The two rolled in a fight that was documented by the reporters covering the entire bizarre story. In the end, Sarah got the worst of it. What she couldn't imagine was that Emily practiced Pilates, and in addition to great flexibility, the result was that Sarah was immobilized. Michael helped pull Sarah away and took her to the house that would now be hers forever. Along the way, the woman cried and said she couldn't believe her ex-husband was being so cruel to her. How could he let her live such a disillusionment? During those days, she had dreamed of how she would enjoy that fortune. Now all she had was the memory of those dreams and the certainty that she would endure many miserable years in that shack. Michael let her say everything she wanted and then replied only, "I didn't do anything you didn't plan to do to me." With these words, he placed her inside the gate and closed it. Michael continued walking back to Emily's house. She had already dispersed the reporters. Michael then told her that he was very grateful for her hospitality and for being a better detective than Sherlock Holmes. She laughed and said, "Elementary, my dear Watson." Michael took advantage of the light moment to tell her that he would help her, giving her a percentage of the prize. Emily blushed and began to refuse what Michael was offering, but he continued and said it was fair since she was the one who helped him get that money. He had more money than he needed, and in addition to changing his daughter's life, he was determined to help Emily return to law school. A few months passed, and the friendship between Michael and Emily only grew. He really helped her as promised. Now she had her own home and no longer needed to make and sell snacks as before. Law school was going very well, and she was excited about completing another semester. Convinced that he wanted to be more than just a friend to Emily, Michael confessed his feelings to her. Nervous, he was afraid of being rejected by the woman who had helped change his life. However, she said she also saw him differently. Both had been deeply hurt in love, but had a new chance to build a beautiful story. Starting a relationship with Emily, Michael decided he would be completely honest with her. He then told her about his plan regarding Sarah. In recent months, he had learned that his ex-wife had fallen into depression and was constantly being hounded by the lawyer who had helped her with her scheme. Michael believed it was her destiny. Despite everything Sarah had done, he couldn't forget that his wife had helped choose the numbers that led to the winning lottery bet. Emily said she understood Michael and that he was right. It was only fair. The man then contacted his ex-wife and arranged to visit her at the couple's old house. When he arrived, he was surprised to see that Sarah had prepared a delicious-smelling dinner for him. She never cooked anything beyond pasta during their marriage, but now she was waiting for him with baked fish and a puree that looked great. Besides that, there were 2 glasses and a bottle of wine on the table. Michael felt it would be rude to refuse and sat down to dine with his ex-wife. She insisted that he drink the wine, but Michael had taken a migraine pill earlier and didn't want to drink. Despite her insistence, he let Sarah fill his glass, and in a moment of distraction on her part, he poured the drink down the sink. He then told her that the visit was meant to offer her a part of the prize. With the empty glasses in front of them, she refilled them with wine, but seemed a bit nervous and ended up mistakenly taking Michael's glass. He just wanted the visit to end quickly, so he said nothing. As soon as she finished drinking the wine, Sarah had a very strange expression and widened her eyes. The woman seemed breathless. Michael asked what was happening. Desperate, she pointed to the glass and only managed to say the word poison. Michael quickly called an ambulance, and the ex-wife was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, the doctors quickly identified the poison and were able to save Sarah's life. However, she wasn't so lucky with the police. After all, It was proven that she had tried to poison Michael and ended up taking the poison herself by mistake. Sarah's new plan was for her ex-husband to die because he had made a will years ago, leaving everything to her and his daughter. She considered Michael's daughter to be a fool, and it wouldn't be hard to rob that girl. Soon, the ex-husband's fortune would be hers alone. After recovering from the stomach pumping, Sarah was sent to prison. Michael regretted trying to help Sarah and nearly being poisoned by her. Indeed, some people didn't deserve to be helped, not by luck, nor by others. This story is a reminder that greed and dishonesty can lead to devastating consequences, while integrity and generosity, even in the face of betrayals and disappointments, can open doors to new opportunities and happiness. Throughout human history, we see many examples of sudden rises and falls, of betrayals that changed the course of history, but also of redemption and new beginnings. These events teach us that, regardless of the circumstances, maintaining honesty and compassion can lead to surprisingly positive outcomes. May this serve as a reflection on the values we choose to cultivate in our lives. May we learn to face adversity with dignity and embrace opportunities with gratitude, knowing that in the end, truth and justice always prevail. I hope you enjoyed this story full of twists and emotions. If you did and want more thrilling narratives like this, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel. Here, every story is a new adventure, and we're always ready to surprise you. Also, leave your comment on what you thought of the story and suggestions for future narratives. See you next time.